998, 999, 1,000. Oh, hi. I didn't see you there. I was just practicing for putting this differential in and out of the car a lot. Anyway, in this episode, we're gonna build mounts for a whole bunch of items in there. We're gonna cut a bunch of things, and we're gonna make this get drag differential fit where it was never designed to fit. Here we go.
Don't ask me if it works. I mean, I assume it does. I don't know. This thing's never been in a wind tunnel.
So with the exhaust exiting on the passenger side of the car, this whole area gets really hot. It got so hot that it actually melted the motor mount on the side. So I'm gonna build a new one that can't be melted. So this is the stock motor mount that the K-Power kits come with. I think it's just an off-the-shelf GM mount, but you can see how much I had to cut it to get the bolts out of that because the whole thing had melted. So I think I'm gonna toss that and just grab this backing plate and put it right there on the motor, and then build some of my own attachment points to hook up to that, which is what actually goes into the subframe. So you can see on the passenger side how this works. This is a normal GM mount the K-Power uses, just right there. And then this piece and this piece are both custom machined. One to fit to the motor, other fit to the subframe. So essentially I'm just going to be making my own this and making it solid as well. So this is just some bar stock that I picked up from metal supermarkets. It's a little bit thinner than the original tabs on these, but only by about 40 thou or so. So I'll try this, just probably add a few more brackets to help reinforce it, and should be fine. Since I'm pretty sure this original piece is galvanized and that's really bad to weld, I'm gonna make a copy of this on a piece of scrap steel that I have laying around. I've always had a way of keeping close. Beating, hiding, I've been calling out your name from the darkness, thinking it's too late. If you're finding I've been too much on your plate, I'll keep. So just so you can see what I'm doing, here's the backing plate that I made. Here's the two new ears. This is the mount that's in here to make sure the spacing is correct. Weld these both in. Yeah, of course it doesn't fit. That's fine. I'll just do a little bit of precision. Ah, fuck. Alright, so now the original K-Power mount that went to the subframe slides right into the bracket that I made. Now I'll just drill the hole for the bolt that goes through there, drill the 3 mounting plate holes, add some gussets here for strength, and should be good. And there we go, one solid motor mount. Oh, one thing. 2,000 degrees? Goodness. Hopefully won't be putting that to the test. And bam. If my calculations are correct, that'll slide right in there with some finesse. Boom. One completely unmeltable engine mount, because exhaust gas can't melt steel mounts. The beauty of this setup is I still have all the old stuff. So if this is too rough for me or I don't like it, I can throw a new rubber mount in there, no harm, no foul. I'll just have to find some way to heat shield it. All right, so the motor is completely 100% in the car. This is where it's gonna sit. The new motor mount is made. This is where it's gonna be. So now I need to make a transmission mount to hold the transmission up, because the CD09 uses a transmission mount, which I like, and the Mazda transmissions do not use transmission mounts, which I didn't like. So we're gonna pop over here and use the door sills as our 0 level, super calibrated bubble level.
And then we're gonna hop under the car where you see the transmission is just being held where I want it by a jack.
And I've positioned the transmission to as close to 0 degrees relative to the car as I can. It's pointed about 1 degree downwards, but as long as I account for that whenever I mount the differential, not gonna be a problem. Space up here in this area between the bottom of the transmission tunnel and the top of the transmission is really tight, but I can fit about a half finger's worth up there, and that should be okay. Another thing to keep in mind is that the fish bell housing adapter all the way down there maintains the original 15-degree slant of the K engines, but the K-Power mounts and oil pan do not maintain quite 15 degrees. So the transmission's cocked that way a little bit. I don't think this is going to cause any issues. If anything, the shifter's just going to be pointed towards me a little bit more, but I think we'll be okay. So now I just have to build me a transmission mount that goes from here to here and catches that. And here's where I get to do a bunch of cutting, grinding, and welding. It's always my favorite part. So I cut myself 2 pieces of steel, then I use the old manual brake and turn them into not flat pieces of steel. Then I cut myself another piece of steel, and I think between these 3 pieces of steel, I can make a transmission mount. Those 2 brackets that I just bent up are here and here on the chassis side, and then this nice thick piece of metal here is going to be the actual support. So I think the brackets I'm going to weld to the chassis, and then instead of these clamps, I'm going to drill and put bolts through here and here, so that whenever I want to remove it, pull a bolt, whole mount comes off. Alright, so I stared at that bracket design for a few minutes and realized I need to make one change to it. I had my crossbar underneath both of these chassis brackets, but I realized that as the motor would start to torque this way, that would stretch this bolt and only be compressed to this transmission mount. So now I have the rubber mounted on the top of this one and bottom of this one. That way, when the motor torques, the bracket is taking the load, not the bolt. Just like over here, where again, motor torques, bracket's gonna be taking the load, not the bolt. So, might not have been a big deal, but I'm gonna change it like that just in case. Anyone else ever have this happen to them while working in the garage? Even when I'm by myself, it feels like a tornado or something went through here. Just like, I know I didn't use all these tools. Clamp time, I guess. So I pulled both the chassis brackets out of the car. I just add some reinforcement tabs there on the side, just give them some extra strength. Also painted the back sides so they don't rust once they're in the car and weld it in. And now,
so the passenger side bracket is roughly in place, and I can do that. That's more or less in place. Crossbar is bolted to the mount. I weld the chassis brackets. Holy shit, that sucked.
drilling those 2 holes under the car while getting covered in metal shavings, easily the least amount of fun I've ever had working on this car. That sucked. But it's in all on its own. Nice. I hope I'm in frame. I think I was in frame. That's good.
With the transmission firmly mounted, I can turn my attention to the rear and focus on the differential.
So I have right here a differential out of a Cadillac. This particular one came out of a CTS, and it is a 3.42 ratio. These differentials are common enough to put into Miatas that V8 Roadsters actually sells them mount. That's great, except they usually only sell that as part of a kit, which includes axles and a drive shaft, neither of which are things that I need. So I contacted V8 Roadsters and said, hey, sell me just the mount. And they said yes, but they also quoted me over $500 for the mount. So right here, I have $25 worth of metal that I got from metal supermarkets, and I'm going to build that $500 differential mount. So because non-solid bushings are for street cars, I made some solid bushings out of literally a tube of steel, just plated both ends. And then I cut this crossbar, so now I'm gonna slide under the car. Bushing is gonna go here on the OEM mount. And then that metal bar goes across from one side to the other. Two L brackets. I'd say that's pretty good for 25 bucks. To support the nose of the transmission, I have these two conveniently cut pieces of metal.
If I've done this properly, whenever I release the jack handle, that diff should stay in the car. Hey, look at that.
Having the driveline components mounted in the car is obviously a huge morale boost. While I'm still missing a drive shaft and axles for this to actually be functional, the majority of the fab work in this area is done and allows me to turn my attention elsewhere.